Welcome to Love Shouldn't Hurt. My name is Hillary Platt, and our show talks about related issues with domestic violence. I am very pleased and honored to welcome Jack Leshnov and Krystal Hunter, my guests. I know Jack and Krystal from going to many meetings at Cooper Hospital in Camden for Cooper Against Domestic Abuse. Krystal not only is the co-chair for CADA, but she's also a statistician, hard to say.
Say that 3 times.
At Cooper. And Jack is also the co-chair for CADA. And what exactly is your role in the emergency department?
So I'm the emergency department social worker.
Okay. All right. So we are here to discuss domestic abuse issues and what might be seen in the hospitals. I want to start out by going over a couple facts that I came up from Camden, just so you know what these amazing people are dealing with when they try to just make a dent, make a difference for victims of domestic abuse. In 2012, for domestic violence acts, there were 5 homicides, 3,255 assaults, 235 terroristic threats, and that could be something like, I'm going to kill, your family member if you tell anybody. 7 kidnappings, 11 criminal restraints, 5 false imprisonments, and 20 sexual assaults. And a lot of people don't even realize that sexual assault is occurring with marital rape, things like that. And these are just what was reported. So it's pretty daunting.
It is. And in Camden County, we have a part of the county in the city that really reports domestic abuse and violence. However, there's parts of the county that it's underreported as well. So those numbers could be triple as high as they are.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's really an epidemic.
Yeah, I think they say almost half of the domestic abuse is not reported.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. And another thing, when you correlate domestic abuse with marital, sexual assault, it just shows the progression of domestic violence. I also do advocacy for our organization Serve, and where I do sexual assault advocacy. I've never had a person who was a victim of marital rape or in a long-term relationship who didn't start out with in a domestic violence.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I'll go out on calls and I'm like, okay, is this a domestic violence or a sexual assault? Because they fall together. So.
Right. And not only are you an advocate for Serve, but you are a domestic violence response team advocate. We are advocates together.
Yes, for Camden County Women's Center, we represent Voorhees and also Cherry Hill and Gloucester, Berlin, Haddonfield, Tavistock, and Gloucester Township.
Right, but I would like to preface this conversation by saying if we bring up any examples, anything that maybe a victim has said or any scenarios, that it's not one specific person that we're talking about.
Absolutely not.
It would be a conglomeration of different cases that we've seen, so nobody's confidentiality will be breached.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about what CADA does?
Okay. So, Krystal, go ahead.
Okay. Well, what we do, we provide education and we provide outreach for the Cooper community as well as the outside community. And we consist of Cooper staff along with our community partners, one being Jewish Family Services, also Serve and the Camden County Women's Center.
Okay.
As well as the prosecutor's office.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to work for an organization like Cooper that supports us wholeheartedly, and that's the beauty of it.
Yes.
That it's such an eclectic team.
It is.
That
it's very
we
much
have
so.
social workers and statisticians.
Yeah.
We have technicians. We have environmental service people on our team, and they're so passionate about this cause.
Right.
And not only the education piece. That's how it started.
Exactly.
It started, we were going to educate the nurses about how to identify, how to help somebody in need.
Right, I was going to ask you about the trainings. So that leads into how do you train the employees at the hospital?
So for the emergency department, we have a 6-hour seminar that's mandatory for staff at the ED.
Yes.
We would love it to be mandatory for the rest of the hospital, but it's difficult.
Right.
So everybody's invited though, so that's the beauty of it. So we get a great turnout. We
Yes,
have
we do.
20, 30
Yeah.
students
Our
per
last year.
class.
Yep.
Actually, it's interesting you're talking about mandatory training because I have a girlfriend who is a psychologist, and she just told me that they just passed a law that psychologists now have to have, I think it's like 4 or 5 hours of mandatory domestic violence training,
It's wonderful.
which I thought was so great.
It is.
And
It
then
is.
recently, a judge told me that that's the only training that municipal judges are required to do once a year. Every year they have to do domestic violence training.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it does, the laws change all the time, and
Absolutely.
we're learning so many more things about the victims and about batterers, and
Yes.
it's just, you need to know the mindset. I was explaining that I would like more training in PTSD when we were at the prosecutor's office, because I was saying that, and then I felt like people in the courts should have more training, because when you're a victim, you often have PTSD, and maybe your thoughts are a little bit scattered, your memory is not
Yes.
great, your confidence is completely plummeted, so you're not sure how to express yourself, and then you're in court, and the judge is saying, okay, tell me exactly what's going on, be to the point, and
Can't do
you're,
it.
yeah, so people need to understand.
That's
what
part
they're
of our
dealing with.
seminar. We talk
Yes.
about those adverse childhood experiences as
Exactly.
well, and how that childhood trauma follows you through life. You have a post-traumatic stress from it, and you get stuck.
Right.
And it's tough to identify what do you do next? How do you get through that? And just recognizing that this is an adverse childhood experience.
Exactly.
You're stuck in this situation, and to get the right kind of counseling is so important.
Right.
Yep. And so it's so involved in every aspect of the health system. So you have to recognize it because it's right in front of you, but you don't realize it's there, and that's why it's so nice and good that they have the training and that they require it.
Now, what's the feedback that you get from the employees that take the training? Do they learn a lot? Are they surprised by the information?
You know what? I think it's different responses. I think because they do have their own training, like when they first start. But I think with us, we go so deep, and I think they're surprised about how persuasive, pervasive, excuse me, that it is.
It's incredibly impactful.
Exactly.
Because we show domestic violence caught on film. There's a
Exactly.
2020 video that we show that literally graphically depicts domestic violence, and it's like a punch to the stomach.
Yeah.
It really gets everybody's attention, and sometimes it traumatizes our audience, and we had to be aware of that as well.
Now, I wanted to ask you about that because of all the social media attention that domestic violence abuse is getting now. I read a very interesting fact that the National Domestic Violence Hotline calls went up 84% after certain videos were showed.
Yes.
How has that affected your emergency
Oh
room?
my goodness. So I can tell you that it's akin to flipping a light switch. That the numbers have doubled and tripled during my hours in the emergency department, and it's good. It's bad that a bad thing is happening in our society, in our communities,
Right.
with the National Football League,
Yes.
those types of things. But for the awareness outcome, and hopefully better education and better services and awareness, things like the program you're doing, Hillary, this is key. It's so important.
So do you think that people are less ashamed and willing to come forward and say, I'm not going to stay home and nurse my broken wrist, and really?
Sure, because I think with the media, it's depicting celebrities are now involved in domestic violence and child abuse, and
Absolutely.
if it can happen to them, then I'm not embarrassed to step forward and to get the help that I need.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. I'll show the audience later our flyer about Tanya Brown, Nicole Brown Simpson's younger sister is going to be speaking at the JCC in Cherry Hill. But it really parallels to when O.J. Simpson was in the media and the whole trial. All of a sudden people really started recognizing and talking about domestic violence. And I actually had Margot Viola, an author of Crack Shell Whole Yolk, on, and she said that when she was awaiting trial, she felt like once the O.J. Simpson celebrity broke in the media, that was what was needed for her trial to actually push forward. So it's interesting. You just don't realize how many people are affected.
Oh, absolutely. It's, a long reach. And I think it shines a light on, looking at the survivor. And, because, all I hear is, oh, then fiance, now wife. But the thing is, it's part of the pattern. It's 7, we all know, 7 times on average.
Right.
So, and once again, it's very hard to leave sometimes, because there are very real situations and they really have to weigh the options.
Sure. It's difficult because if you're faced with, well, I have a $500,000 home, I have a nice car, versus going to a domestic violence safe house.
Right.
But the bottom line is none of the materialistic things are worth risking your or your children's lives. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will often have clients say to me, I knew I had to be ready to just leave everything behind to be able to be safe.
Yeah.
So speaking of being able to recognize domestic abuse, I love that whenever I go to our meetings, we'll have something educational, and I'm always learning something new. And it was very poignant for me. You showed a video at one of our meetings, and it talked about training professionals, and it doesn't have to be just a medical professional.
No.
It could be a veterinarian. It could be a dentist who is medical, but it could be so many different people.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about how the video explained how little it actually takes?
Oh, goodness, yes. What they do, well, first of all, the video outlines how, once again, you may see a person go through several areas of your medical system, whether it's emergency, obstetrics, oncology, psychology, GI, it's all, so pervasive. Then what they do, they have scenarios where doctors will broach the subject. Like, for instance, there was an example of you have a child who is starting to act out. And once again, that tends to be a sign that there may be something going on in the home. Well, they show the doctor saying, well, because the mother explains, oh, my child's acting out, got in a fight, what have you. And so what the doctor said was, well, what's going on at home? Do you feel safe? Asking those questions. Once again, it's only a few questions that will give you kind of a view of what may be going on.
And honestly, it only takes a few questions because
very few.
In my experience, if you're dealing with abuse at home and someone just asks you that one question, it's such a burden to get off your shoulders.
It opens up the floodgates.
It really
Are
does.
you safe?
Yes.
And then as a professional, as a social worker, I'm there. I'm there to console. I'm there to support. I'm there to educate. I'm giving you the resources to make changes if you're ready.
Right.
Exactly.
And she has to be ready.
Right. The most dangerous time we all know is when a victim is getting ready to leave.
Yes.
So
or has left recently.
Right. Or is pregnant.
Oh yes.
Right.
Yes.
So we all know never to push, and we always reiterate to the person we're talking to that they know best. But like you said, giving resources and education, and Krystal, like you said, the average person takes 7 times, 3 to 5 years to leave. The average person's hit 35 times before they report it. So we know as professionals that it's not crying wolf. That person can come to us and leave, and come to us and leave, and just know that we will be there when they're ready.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the beauty of the emergency department. The doors are always open.
Absolutely.
24/7.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell my patients that aren't ready. We'll always be there.
Right.
Yep.
I have a question for you guys. Excuse me.
Yes.
Let me interrupt you 1 second.
This is Keith.
Is there, they always say some of the things like once a do you think that abusers are always going to be abusers even with help? Because they obviously need help too.
That's a great question.
Oh, absolutely.
So we actually have looked into this a smidge. The recidivism rates, the repeat rates for the male abusers without intervention is almost 100%.
Wow.
Horrifying.
Yes.
So the threshold, it's a violence threshold. Once you've passed that violence threshold and the abuse becomes physical in nature, that's typically the no going back point.
But do you do counseling on the other end though to try to help these people?
Absolutely. There's programs. We have another partnership with Volunteers of America, and they have great clinicians that deal with the male batterer.
Now let me ask you one more question. Now, okay, there's a woman being abused by a man. The man seeks help. Is the woman almost like the hitch of the violence, to where even though he's going to be cured or gets cured, whenever she comes into play, that mechanism's just going to come out?
No, and that's...
So it's possible that they could get back
It is,
together.
because in actuality, it's the male that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has not. It doesn't matter who the woman is, or the next woman, or the next wife, or the ex-wife. It's irrelevant. It's the male that has the issue that needs the help.
It's the coping mechanisms that you need to change.
Absolutely. And the thing is, the fact of the matter is, people work in patterns. Not a person can't change that pattern. An outside person cannot change that pattern. The person who has the pattern has to decide to change it. If they've gotten some benefit, even if it's in their own mind, if they perceive that they got some benefit, they're not going to change the pattern.
No.
And that's why you have the recidivism. Now, to be cured, you have to be able to take account.
Right.
If you're not, exactly, and you have to take account for because one of the marks of an abuser is always blaming someone else. It's always someone else's fault.
Right.
So what you have to do is say, wait a minute, okay, where am I accountable? That's a key, and even with the training with Volunteers of America, that's one of the signs that they know they're ready to move forward.
And for the quote unquote victim, survivor, what we try and do is educate them to recognize the signs that they're giving out as well, their vulnerability. The male batterers are almost sociopathically able to mold the women and pick out the women and their targets. So we want to empower the women that we work with.
Oftentimes I'll say to a client, your characteristics that make you so wonderful and that make you you also make you a target for a batterer to zone in. So if you are empathetic and you're sensitive and you put others before you, these are all things that are great traits, but also make you vulnerable for someone to hone in on you. So sometimes clients will try to blame themselves and say, well, am I picking these people? But I try to say, well, look at it this way, that they're honing on you.
They're picking you.
Yeah.
Is abuse hereditary on both ends, the abuser or the abusee? Because,
You have a great question. I know, awesome question.
Does the husband's father used to abuse either him or his mother, the grandfather, and so forth, and then on the other side, the daughter saw the mother be abused, so she felt it was okay, and then so forth down the line.
Keith, you're right on target. There's no genetic predisposition, but it's a learned behavior passed down generations to generation. You learn what your father teaches you as a son, as a daughter learns what their mother teaches them. And that's the vicious cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
Do you think that any error is responsible for this? And what I mean by that, in the 50s, mom was supposed to stay at home, and they really were kind of like they were supposed to be at home and really weren't supposed to say nothing. Males out doing their thing. Just recently, the change of, there's sugar mamas out there now. You know what I mean? The women are working, doing everything. So is there a certain era that this kind of progressed, in your opinion?
I would say no. I think it's a cop-out.
I
think
total,
that domestic abuse is domestic abuse regardless of era, situation. Violence is violence.
Absolutely.
And whether it was the 50s with our parents or grandparents or this era with us, it's still violence.
And the thing is, like my mom, I always call her June Cleaver because she loved to stay home. She cooked meals. She was the ultimate stay-at-home mom, and she really made the household run. But at the same time, abuse is an imbalance of power, and the household, that was her kingdom, okay? And she called the shots, and my dad worked, but there was that equal balance, and an abuser will will do something to a victim intentionally.
Yes.
To put them down, to make sure that they have no control. And so, for instance, if I'm kidding around with someone that I'm intimate with, and then we maybe hit each other by accident, it wasn't intentional. It's not abuse. But if I put you down, that's abuse, because I'm intentionally making you down here and me up here, just like a bully would. So in the 50s, if you had a healthy relationship, that didn't happen.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yep. And you have to realize too, you talk about a change, but I think what happened, you didn't have the level of reporting that you have, that as things progressed throughout the years. I think it just so happened that, as things, became a little, looser, and people started to bring this stuff up, you're hearing about it more. But understand, back in the 50s, before that, it was behind the closed doors.
Right.
And I know, certain, traditions, it's like what goes on at home stays at home.
Right.
You don't talk about that.
And there weren't
Outside.
laws to protect.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a big medieval guy, and I watch all the Game of Thrones and stuff like that. Women were helpless. I mean, they really had no way to turn, for abuse. So I sit there and look at it and I say, where did this thing begin? And I think for men, and this is another question, where, I don't know if you have the percentages, but how much of the men that are abusers, how much does it relate to drugs and alcohol?
So drugs and alcohol are symptomatic, that they're uninhibitors, but they are not causes of abuse or violence.
Okay.
So the abuser violence is there, and it's just the alcohol just makes it come out in different
Right,
ways.
so he's going to strike whether he's drank
Correct.
his bottle
Yes.
of whatever
Yeah.
or not.
Correct.
All
Okay.
alcohol or drugs do is provide an excuse. And you have to realize, because you could have 10 alcoholics, you could have another 10 drug addicts. Guess what? Only a certain percentage are going to be abusive. Because once again, it's just it's a characteristic. If it's within you to be abusive, you're going to abuse whether you're drunk or sober. So it's just an excuse.
Let me ask you another question. When a woman comes to you guys, I'm sorry.
Or a man.
Or a man.
Yes.
Or a man. When they come to you and they're identifying that they're being abused, obviously, like Hillary said, those numbers, like 37 times it takes before you. Do you start working with them now? How to do you have to understand the abuser to where you can say, okay, when he does this, you need to do this to.
No.
Is that hard to do? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
almost-
it's relationship building.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and I have the luxury of being a frontline social worker. So when the patient comes into the emergency department, or to labor and delivery, or to trauma.
labor and delivery.
Labor and
Oh
delivery,
yes, absolutely.
What do you
Yep.
mean?
So
Like they're
women,
hitting a pregnant.
Yes. Oh,
women,
yes.
women are at the
Yeah.
most vulnerable. They're at the most
Very.
vulnerable when they're pregnant.
Because they have the control with being pregnant, the abuser doesn't have that control.
Right, the attention is to baby,
Yes.
not to the abuser.
But you have to realize that it's a vicious cycle sometimes, because sometimes the abuser may purposely get their partner pregnant because once again she's very vulnerable. But what he fails to realize, wait a minute, I'm not going to be the center of the universe anymore. Then all of a sudden it's a problem, and then they try to destroy.
It's like lions. Why the lions try to kill the lion cubs? I mean,
Mhm.
that's
Oh, yeah.
insane.
Absolutely.
You know what? When I see a pregnant woman walking around, especially like in a mall or something, and their belly's like they're ready to pop, I always go up to them and say, "Please, go sit down." I'm not kidding.
Remind them
Like, because if you slip on this floor or something, I mean, my God.
They should be
And
treated
now
like
someone-
royalty.
They
Right, and now someone's
absolutely,
beating them
absolutely.
Yeah.
with a child. That's
And at JFCS, one of the things that we'll do when we meet with someone, we'll go over an exit strategy. Now that exit strategy might be for that week, might be for that day. Sometimes it could be for 8, 12 months. It depends on how that person feels, that if they're imminently in danger, if they're being abused emotionally, financially. There's a lot of things that you have to consider leaving. You have to consider your safety, your family's
Absolutely.
safety, your children's safety, the safety of your pets. So exit strategies could be from making sure that you have birth certificates to getting the pet's ownership in your name, so you can leave with the pet. There's so many different things to consider. So I'm sure that you go over that with.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Interesting point about the pets too, because we have had many, it's textbook. The abuser will hurt the pets and say, "You're next."
Yep.
And it's the most horrifying thing. Patients are hysterical. They love, of course, there's a connection to
They
the
will
pet.
stay.
Yes,
For the pets.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like your children. It is like your children. You tell me you're going to threaten my loved one.
And then some people will stay and be abused to actually protect their children, and it's a double-edged sword
absolutely.
because although it's so harmful for children to be in an abusive household, sometimes when that person is abusive, you can escape them, but they're still going to get partial custody of the children. They're still going to see the children, and that victim might be afraid for their children, so they stay to protect their children. So sometimes people are judging and they say that's a bad mother because she's staying and her kids are in that situation, but you just never know.
It's all about loyalty and keeping the family together. And that's mom's role in family, is to keep that family unit together.
Just like that movie Enough that we talked about with
Yes.
J-Lo. That was so powerful, and I've never really seen a movie after that that kind of talks about that, which they should, because she had that plan. She was a badass too.
and that's all about empowerment. And we also try to empower the people that we talk to, which is another reason why we don't tell them what to do, because then we're just
Absolutely
taking the place of the abuser.
Absolutely.
They have to be in
But to
charge
make
of
the
their own.
decision.
Do. It's
Absolutely.
their life,
Yeah.
it's their situation,
Yeah.
and they're coming from a situation where they have no power, they have no control. They need all of that.
Well, if they're no woman deserves to be beaten, or man, but I mean, if you're beating a pregnant woman, you need to go hire a hitman, because that person, I'm sorry, that's terrible.
Happens every
That's
day,
terrible.
Yeah.
every
That's-
single day.
Absolutely.
That's terrible. I applaud you guys for dealing with that, because that's terrible.
And we were talking about empowerment, which leads me to tell my audience that we have an evening of empowerment with author Tanya Brown, Nicole Brown Simpson's younger sister. She will share her book, Peace Amid the Chaos, My Escape from Depression and Suicide. And we will also be having a book signing. It'll be Tuesday night, October 28th at 7:30 at the Cats JCC in Cherry Hill. So it'll be very interesting. So if you can call the Cats JCC at 856-424-4444 and ask them for more information. Are we actually done our segment?
Yes.
Oh my God! Will you guys come back?
Absolutely.
Okay, because we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
I stole the show.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
great. It was
Congratulations.
really wonderful, and it
Fantastic.
sped by. So now you'll have to come back
Super. Thanks so much.
and we'll talk more about all the obstacles and barriers and the resources that
Perfect.
you help everybody with at the hospital every day.
Mhm.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
yeah. And just an FYI, the Camden County Women's Center is sponsoring a dessert night. If you want any information, you can call the line at 856-227-1234.
That's right, and it's actually the day after our Tanya event,
Yes.
and
Yep.
I'm going to be there
29th.
also.
Yes, and so will I.
Yeah, and it's a fun night, and they have great raffles,
Yes.
and it's an amazing organization to support.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right, thank you, and remember, love shouldn't hurt.